Hello, we are from Wandsworth Autism Advisory Service. Welcome to the first part of our three-part series of webinars in supporting young people with autism with behaviours that challenge. In today's webinar, we will explore and think together about the differences between autism-related behaviour, personality or developmentally based behaviours. We will also begin to think a little bit about why behaviour might be challenging. The session will conclude with some discussion about your child's routine, strengths and preferences. At the end of the webinar, we will offer a short homework task to help you prepare for the second webinar. It might be helpful to have a pen and paper to make notes as we go through.
As we begin to think together about behaviour, we thought it would be helpful to start by thinking a little bit about the diagnosis of autism and how it might relate to behaviour. What we know about autism is that all people with a diagnosis share certain challenges, but that the experience of being a person with autism is different for each person. It is for this reason that autism is considered a spectrum condition. The main criteria for diagnosis are persistent difficulties with social communication interaction. This can mean that a person with autism often has difficulty reading other people, either through not recognizing or understanding others' feelings and intentions, both verbally or non-verbally. They might also find it difficult to consistently express their own emotions and thoughts clearly to another person. One young person once described their experience of social communication interaction to me as feeling like they were waking up in Tokyo every single day. So they had said to me that how they interact with the world and how they interact with people around them would be like waking up every morning and you know the people that are in your family because they've been in your family forever, but that everybody is speaking a different language to you. So you're speaking English and they're all speaking Japanese, and that they're all going ahead with their routine and you feel lost, and they're giving you instructions, and even though you know them really, really well, you don't understand what they're instructing you to do. And that's when you're in your safe space at home. The young person said to me, imagine what it's like when I go to school or I go out into the community, and it's a less predictable environment, a less familiar environment, and you've got people telling you to do things, and they're still speaking in Japanese and you're still speaking in English, and they're nodding when they mean no, and they're shaking their head when they mean yes, and all those subtle gestures and facial cues that go along with the subtlety of communication is completely lost on you. And that's how you're processing your entire day, is trying to break down what people are saying and the expectations that people assume that you should know what's going on around you, but you don't know how to necessarily communicate that, and that's happening on a daily basis, that sense of waking up in Tokyo. The second diagnostic criteria, which probably heavily relates to my Tokyo example, is that of repetitive behaviours. And this often relates to heightened interests in particular activities or things. This is sometimes explained by the fact that the world around a young person with an autism diagnosis can seem very unpredictable, and it can be a very confusing place for them. And so having a daily routine or set of activities or actions that they like to engage in can help them to feel less worried and more grounded in the world around them. The final main criteria is sensory sensitivity. So a person with autism may also experience over or under sensitivity to sounds, or to touch, or to taste, or to smell, or to light, or to colours, or temperature, or even pain. So for example, they may find certain background sounds which other people would ignore or block out unbearably loud or distracting. And so this criteria suggests that people with autism see, hear and respond to the world differently when compared to typically developing peers, neurotypically developing peers. And these experiences can impact on how a person thinks, behaves and interacts. And we'll hold this in mind as we think together about behaviour over the next few weeks. We also wondered, are there times for you when it can be tricky to identify when behaviour is autism related and when it's not? The traits relating to autism cannot always explain some of your child's behaviours. Sometimes it can be explained by other factors such as your child's engagement in exploration and their curiosity about what might happen next in relation to your reaction or the reaction of others. It's also not autism if the behaviour is age appropriate. So for example, a 4-year-old offering a hug to a teacher can be developmentally appropriate, but a 16-year-old hugging a teacher would not be. And the same goes for behaviours that are more challenging. Some are developmentally appropriate and some are not. Behaviour can also be explained sometimes by your child's personality. For example, if they are a perfectionist and they need to finish things completely before moving on to the next task, that can sometimes present as a behaviour that will challenge. You probably have often heard about them having a fixed agenda or a child-led focus in how they engage with things, and sometimes that might be more related to their personality than to anything else. Also, if your child is of a daredevil nature, they may not consistently respond to your instructions or prompts about safety. Behaviour can also be explained by pressing physical needs. So tiredness, hunger, those are key factors. If we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a triangle that talks about how you develop and grow and learn through life. But it only happens if the base of the triangle is solid. So that's around having shelter, having food, having adequate sleep, having access to water. So, if a child is feeling dehydrated or tired or hungry, that can trigger the beginnings of what could escalate into a behaviour that challenges. And so for those reasons, that's why we're thinking about behaviour across these next 3 sessions, is to think about what is the behaviour, what the function of it might be, and how we can unpick that so that when we are seeing a behaviour that challenges us or the situation around us, that we are choosing the appropriate strategies to support with that. So here's the big question: what is behaviour? There are countless theories associated with human behaviour. Understanding behaviour is very important as it can shed light on patterns of actions or the thinking behind the things that we do. There are some common themes across the theories within the literature, and they include behaviour describes a person's actions or conduct. All behaviour, whether challenging or not, has a meaning and a purpose. This meaning or purpose of behaviour is widely considered to be a form of communication. There are also internal and external influences on behaviour. So something that's happening internally, biologically for us, or something outside can have an impact. And usually other people are able to see and observe our behaviour. Now that we've talked a little bit about how behaviour is defined, it is helpful if we now think about what it is about behaviour that we label as challenging. We pose some questions on this slide as we begin to think about behaviours that are challenging, and these questions will be helpful to reflect back onto across the next 3 sessions. It is always important to remind ourselves that context is very influential in how we perceive or process situations. For example, in thinking about the first question, who is it challenging for? This might be different depending on who was around or who was not around at the time of seeing the behaviour that challenges. It also might include where you are when it's happening, what else is going on when it's happening. And in thinking about this, it helps us to think about how we might react relative to the answers we give to questions I've just posed. Our perceptions and ideas about behaviour are often rooted in our own experiences in childhood and societal values, and this can influence how we view behaviour. The perception of challenging might also link to our views of ourselves as parents and carers, and challenge our capacity as a parent or carer. Another helpful question to open up our understanding of behaviour that challenges is, how is your child experiencing it? When they're engaged in a behaviour that challenges, do they seem confused? Is the behaviour escalating? Are they eager to finish what they are doing and presenting as quite focused? Are they in distress? Your child's experience of the situation plays a key role in how we might react to the situation, and sometimes it might be that they are not picking up on the implicit cues that you are sending out, and do not actually see themselves in a challenging situation. When they do pick up on your verbal or visual cues, this may then add to an escalation phase and result in them becoming distressed, having not previously been. Finally, what language do we use to describe behaviour? Do we use words like aggressive rather than assertive? Or describe the behaviour using adjectives rather than describing exactly what the behaviour is and why it has become challenging? We might also use words such as always and constantly when we're trying to describe the frequency of behaviour.
So we're now going to have a think about a typical day in your home. You might like to have a pen and paper to hand. So imagine I came to your home on a typical day. Think about what I might see. On a piece of paper, jot down how your child's day starts on a typical day. Now, on a new line, jot down what happens next. On a new line again, jot down what then happens. And after that. So we could continue mapping out a typical day for your child, and this might be something you want to continue with over the week. But if we go back to that first item on your list and you think about how difficult your child's routine is at this point, on a scale of 1 to 5, rate how difficult they find their routine at this point, with 1 being low difficulty and 5 being high difficulty, and jot this down next to the first item. Still thinking about that first item, rate how difficult this point of their routine is for you. And finally, still using that 1 to 5 scale, rate down the likelihood of them showing challenging behaviour at this moment. So by rating each part of your child's typical routine, you should begin to see patterns in which parts of the routine may be more or less challenging for both you and for your child. And you might like to do this for other parts of your child's routine out in the community, such as the journey to school or going to a place of worship, things like using public transport or going to the supermarket. Remember, by breaking down the routine into detail and analysing how you and your child are feeling at different points, you'll be able to see which parts of the routine may be more or less challenging for both of you. We're now going to have a little think about strengths and interests, because knowing your child's strengths and their preferences is a key part in supporting them. By focusing on what they're good at and what they're interested in, you're more likely to engage them with activities or parts of their routine which they're normally less interested in. That's why now next boards are quite popular for shaping routines, because they bookend less desirable activities with more desirable ones. So to do this, it's helpful to know what motivates your child and what they're good at. The first part is to identify what your child's strengths are and what they prefer or are interested in. There may be some overlap, as people often prefer things that they're good at, but of course this isn't always the case. To identify your child's strengths and preferences, you might use your own experience of what they like. You might observe what toys or cartoon characters they prefer. You might choose to talk to them about what they like and what they like doing, special topics of interest. Or you might talk to others, such as their teachers or other members of the family, and see what they notice. Or you might like to use a trial and error approach where you try something new and see what happens. So how does using strengths and preferences help us to understand more about our child? All of this information gathering helps you to start from the position of your child, start with where they're at, and help it to be really child-led. Engaging them in things they may be less keen on means that you can link this to something that they do like. And finally, sharing their interests with them, which is something that we're going to look at next.
Following the child's lead involves engaging them in ways that they want to. It's important that it is clear to your child that you are following their lead. This will help them to see that you are respecting their preferences, value the shared space you have created with them, and that you are able to have fun. This protected time enables you both to feel safe to explore and learn together about each other, about what you do, what you say, how you play, what's important. Much time is spent going through the essential activities of the day. Part of developing and maintaining a positive parent-child relationship is seeing the adult spending time following the lead of the child. It is important too that we then prioritise and plan in times of the day that our child led. This becomes easier to remember and commit to when we identify where it fits into our daily routine. For older children, you can discuss with them when they would like this time to be and agree on what to do together in advance. These are the first steps in following your child's lead. First, choose a time when your child is calm, when your child is happy, and when your child is engaged. And I think that's quite important. Choose a time when you see them at their optimum, when they're doing something that you know that they enjoy because it's something that they like to do, perhaps a lot of the time, and when they look to you like they are quite calm and content in themselves. You can use your routine planning from earlier in the week to pick a time in the day when you're both feeling calm, because you feeling okay to participate is really important too. Next, set time boundaries for the activity. Think about how long they will be engaged for and how long you will follow their lead for. You may stop following their lead after a certain period of time when a timer goes off. Or when you are clear that you're moving on to something else, but they can continue playing. Or you may also stop following their lead when the child might indicate that they don't want you to play anymore. We've put 2 links to 2 videos up on our PowerPoint, and it's about tuning in and following the lead. So we'd ask you to watch at least one of them and think about following the lead and noticing what the adult is doing. So what language is the adult using? What does their tone of voice sound like? Are there silences within the interaction? Is the young person responding? Is there a lot of visual contact? How physically close is the person sitting? And yeah, maybe just reflect on that a little bit prior to finding a time to engage in this work with your child.
So on this slide, there's some helpful tips of things to be mindful of when following your child's lead. So be sure that many of your child's preferred activities are available. Be available to and engaged with your child. So you want to be close to them, giving them your full attention, so not distracted by other things, and providing really high quality attention. It's important to honour all of the reasonable requests for things or actions in their play. So if they're asking you to crawl on the floor, crawl on the floor, as long as they're safe and it doesn't involve damaging the toys or the activities or their surroundings, go with it. If your child does make an unreasonable request, let them know that this isn't available at the moment or it's not safe for them to do it, and try redirecting them to something that is. And when following your child's lead, it's important not to place any demands on them, including things like instructions or lots of questions. So make it clear to your child that they're in charge during this time and that you're going to follow what they are asking you to do. And it's also important to hold back and not launch in unless you're invited to. So not necessarily picking up toys unless your child's handing them to you or asking you to pick something. So we're coming towards the end of our first webinar now. We have a couple of homework activities for you to think about. So the first one is to continue completing your child's routine and rating. If you've got time, try to repeat the task with other parts of your child's routine, such as community setting, particularly places that you find quite challenging. So if you find visits to the supermarket particularly difficult, it might be worth doing the routine planning for something like that. And then the second task is to find a time to follow your child's lead. Remember to think really carefully about the best time to do this. You're looking for a time when they're calm and when you're calm, and when you've got the time and space available to really give them your focus and attention. In our next webinar, there'll be an opportunity for you to feedback on these experiences. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us for this first webinar, and we look forward to seeing you at the second one.
Take care.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.